Welcome to Rapid Report, your go-to source for breaking political news and in-depth analysis. Tonight, we dive deep into a story shaking the foundations of American politics. President Donald Trump's second term is facing unprecedented turmoil. Multiple impeachment resolutions are currently active in Congress, ranging from obstruction of justice to alleged abuse of power, with at least one resolution considered privileged, meaning it could be forced onto the House floor at any moment. On top of this, discussions around the 25th Amendment, which allows for the removal of a president deemed unfit, are adding a new layer of tension to an already volatile administration. In this report, we will break down the key impeachment articles, explore the political calculations behind these moves, analyze the potential risks for Democrats, and discuss how the constant threat of removal is impacting governance, foreign policy, and financial markets. Stay tuned as we unpack the crisis shaking the White House from the inside out and explain why, even without a formal vote, the shadow of impeachment is destabilizing the presidency like never before. Trump's second administration in deep crisis. Impeachment and the 25th Amendment loom. Donald Trump's second term as president is entering uncharted territory. With multiple impeachment resolutions circulating in Congress and discussions around the 25th Amendment gaining traction, the administration faces a dual threat that has cast a permanent cloud over the White House. This constant tension not only challenges Trump's political standing, but also destabilizes governance, creates uncertainty in domestic and global markets, and complicates foreign policy decision-making. The unfolding narrative of Trump's embattled presidency can be understood across four major arcs: mounting impeachment pressure, the 25th Amendment as a parallel threat, strategic political calculations, and broader consequences for governance and international perception. 1. Mounting impeachment pressure. The impeachment threat against President Trump is not a singular, isolated concern. It is multi-layered and intensifying. Congress currently hosts multiple resolutions targeting the president, reflecting a growing determination among Democrats to keep the possibility of removal loaded and ready. H.R. 353 and its 7 articles, one of the most comprehensive efforts, H.R. 353, presents 7 distinct articles of impeachment. 1. Obstruction of justice. Accusations that Trump interfered with federal investigations and judicial processes. 2. Abuse of trade powers. Alleged misuse of presidential authority in matters of trade and tariffs. 3. Violations of spending authority. Concerns that Trump exceeded his constitutional power over federal spending. 4. First Amendment violations. Alleged interference with press freedoms or the rights of citizens to free speech. 5. Bribery and corruption. Claims that Trump engaged in or solicited corrupt practices. 6. Abuse of pardon power. Allegations that the president used pardons to protect allies or himself. 7. Tyranny. A broader, politically charged charge framing Trump's behavior as authoritarian. Additional resolutions by Representative Al Green. Beyond H.R. 353, Representative Al Green has introduced 2 separate resolutions, H.R. 415 and H.R. 939, focusing specifically on abuse of power and incitement of violence. Importantly, at least one of these resolutions is privileged, meaning Democrats could force it onto the House floor for a vote at any time, bypassing usual procedural hurdles. This tactic keeps the president in a state of constant political vulnerability, where a floor vote could arise unexpectedly. Trump's rejection of responsibility. President Trump has publicly rejected responsibility for the accusations, insisting he bears zero accountability. This stance sets the tone for confrontation, framing any impeachment efforts as politically motivated rather than constitutionally necessary. Meanwhile, Democrats insist their actions reflect a constitutional duty to uphold the law and the integrity of the presidency. 2. The 25th Amendment as a parallel threat. While impeachment dominates headlines, discussions surrounding the 25th Amendment add an additional layer of political tension. Section 4 of the amendment allows the cabinet to declare a president unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, temporarily transferring authority to the vice president. Although politically unlikely, commentators, activists, and legal scholars have increasingly speculated about invoking this process against Trump. Even the mere discussion of Section 4 creates instability, signaling to domestic and international audiences that the president's capacity to govern could be questioned at any moment. The procedural steps are clear. 1. A written declaration by the vice president and a majority of the cabinet stating the president is unfit. 2. Immediate transfer of powers to the vice president. 3. If the president contests, Congress decides within 21 days. This mechanism is technically separate from impeachment, yet it functions as a parallel threat capable of shaking confidence in the presidency. 3. Strategic calculations and political risks. Democrats face a delicate balancing act. Impeachment could achieve its goal of limiting Trump's authority, but it also carries significant political risks. Keeping the pressure alive. By maintaining multiple resolutions and keeping discussions about the 25th Amendment in the public eye, Democrats ensure Trump's administration operates under constant threat, weakening his political leverage. Avoiding premature votes. A premature House vote risks failure, which could paradoxically strengthen Trump politically, energizing his base and reinforcing his narrative of being unfairly targeted. Therefore, strategic patience is central, with lawmakers waiting for either a scandal or controversy that galvanizes public support for removal, a shift in public opinion that justifies action and mitigates political backlash. Historical precedent. Historically, impeachment efforts against sitting presidents have had the unintended effect of consolidating support among loyalists. For Trump, repeated threats could paradoxically energize his core supporters, making any eventual action both more impactful and more politically charged. 4. Consequences for governance and global perception. Even without an actual vote, the constant cloud of removal significantly impacts governance, weakening foreign policy leverage. Foreign leaders are reportedly monitoring Washington with increased caution. Uncertainty about Trump's political stability can hinder diplomatic negotiations, reduce credibility, and embolden adversaries who perceive internal vulnerability. Market and economic uncertainty. Investors react negatively to prolonged political instability. The continuous discussion of impeachment and potential removal injects volatility into financial markets, raising concerns over trade, tariffs, and economic policy continuity. Internal chaos. Within the administration, staff and allies face mounting pressure. Trump's reactive posture, attacks on critics, and constant public disputes further complicate governance, creating internal chaos and heightening the risk of missteps in both domestic and foreign policy. Donald Trump's second administration is defined not just by policy battles or political controversy, but by the persistent shadow of removal mechanisms. Multiple impeachment resolutions, the hypothetical invocation of the 25th Amendment, and ongoing public scrutiny create a presidency under siege. Even without a formal vote, the perception of vulnerability reshapes political strategy, destabilizes governance, and undermines confidence both domestically and abroad. For Trump and his administration, the challenge is not only defending against potential removal, but navigating a presidency in which every action is amplified, scrutinized, and politicized. The coming months will test not only the president's political resilience, but the effectiveness of Congress in balancing constitutional oversight with strategic prudence, highlighting the fragile interplay between law, politics, and public perception in modern American governance. 5. Institutional pressures and checks on power. Trump's second term illustrates the tension between executive authority and congressional oversight. Multiple impeachment resolutions and 25th Amendment discussions are not just political theater. They reveal how U.S. institutions react under stress. Congress as a check. The active resolutions show Congress willing to wield constitutional powers proactively, signaling that lawmakers are ready to respond to perceived executive misconduct, even before public outrage peaks. Legal versus political accountability. Trump faces a dual standard: legal accountability through impeachment and political accountability through public opinion. The interplay between these mechanisms complicates both Congress's strategy and the administration's response. Institutional fatigue. Repeated threats and ongoing investigations can strain administrative capacity. Staff turnover, shifting loyalties, and legal distractions reduce efficiency, impacting policy execution. This underscores a broader principle. Executive instability has cascading effects, weakening the very machinery of governance that the president relies on to implement policy. 6. Media narratives and public perception. The role of media in amplifying this crisis cannot be overstated. The constant reporting on impeachment resolutions, 25th Amendment speculation, and Trump's public statements creates a feedback loop that influences both public opinion and elite political calculations. Polarization and partisanship. Coverage tends to be highly partisan, with outlets framing the situation either as a constitutional necessity or as a politically motivated witch hunt. This polarization heightens the risk that impeachment debates energize Trump's base rather than diminish his support. Social media amplification. Platforms like Threads, formerly Twitter, and TikTok act as accelerants, spreading both factual reporting and viralized political narratives, often shaping the perceptions of younger voters or swing constituencies. Psychological impact on governance. The president's reaction to media scrutiny, heightened defensiveness, public attacks on critics, and attempts to control narratives can further destabilize internal decision-making and complicate negotiations with both allies and opponents. In short, media is both a tool and a threat, shaping the environment in which impeachment and 25th Amendment discussions unfold. 7. Strategic behavior within the administration. Inside the White House, the persistent threat of removal affects the behavior of Trump and his closest advisors. Heightened defensiveness. Trump's repeated denials of responsibility and confrontational rhetoric are both a defense mechanism and a political signal to his supporters. Risky policy moves. To project strength, the administration may pursue aggressive or unorthodox policies, risking domestic backlash or international friction. Factionalism. Staff and cabinet members may calculate their positions based on political survival, aligning with or distancing from Trump depending on perceived likelihood of impeachment or 25th Amendment invocation. This internal dynamic further fuels policy inconsistency and unpredictability, with long-term consequences for governance and institutional credibility. 8. International implications. Trump's instability reverberates far beyond Washington. Allies' uncertainty. Traditional allies may hesitate in negotiations, fearing abrupt policy reversals or public confrontation. Adversaries' calculations. Opponents could exploit perceived weakness to advance strategic goals or challenge U.S. influence in critical regions. Global financial markets. Investors and international institutions respond to political risk. Uncertainty about U.S. leadership can depress markets, increase borrowing costs, and disrupt trade and investment flows. In essence, the domestic political crisis is now a global economic and diplomatic concern, demonstrating how intertwined U.S. political stability is with international systems. 9. The feedback loop of crisis. A key feature of Trump's second-term crisis is the self-reinforcing feedback loop between threat, reaction, and destabilization. 1. Threats arise. Impeachment resolutions. Public calls for the 25th Amendment. Media scrutiny. 2. Administration reacts. Trump doubles down publicly, attacks critics, reshuffles staff. 3. Institutional and public uncertainty grows. Congress, markets, and international actors respond to perceived instability. 4. Further political attacks. Democrats keep threats alive, creating continuous pressure. This loop makes the presidency highly reactive, leaving little room for long-term strategic planning. 10. Potential outcomes and long-term implications. Looking ahead, the situation may evolve in several ways. Stalemate. Congress continues to wield threats without an actual vote, keeping Trump politically constrained but avoiding escalation that could strengthen him. Escalation to a vote. A scandal or shift in public sentiment triggers a House vote, possibly energizing Trump's base while exposing deep partisan divides. 25th Amendment invocation. Although improbable, the discussion alone serves as leverage against perceived erratic behavior. Governance paralysis. Regardless of action, persistent instability could undermine policy implementation, weakening U.S. credibility both domestically and abroad. Ultimately, the real consequence of this crisis is structural instability. It erodes trust in executive leadership, complicates bipartisan cooperation, and introduces uncertainty into every dimension of governance. That wraps up our in-depth look at the growing crisis in President Trump's second administration. From multiple active impeachment resolutions to ongoing debates over the 25th Amendment, the White House is navigating a storm of political and institutional pressures that have real consequences at home and abroad. If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to hit that like button, share this report with friends and colleagues, and subscribe to Rapid Report for more timely updates on politics, governance, and global affairs. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a breaking story, because in today's fast-moving political world, every moment counts, and we'll be here to keep you informed every step of the way.